Hello and welcome back to my channel, Boozy Bookish Thoughts. I'm Justine, or Jay if you prefer, and welcome to my new video. So last Tuesday we had a kind of serious talk. I didn't touch my wine at all, but I was talking about something that's very close to my to my heart. That's what I meant. But today we are doing wine and book night, yay, our signature series. And for this, this is the episode that's coming in closest to Halloween. I will be posting on Tuesday, November 1st, but that won't be a wine and book night. So this is the wine and book night closest to Halloween. And so I picked up a wine that had a spooky, ooky name, and it is this. Can you see it? Hope's End. Run away to the dark side to a place called Port Misery, Southern Australia. So it's an Australian red blend. It's an Australian red blend, and on the back it says, "This dark, brooding wine is a tribute to the brave souls who set sail to the dark side of the world in search of a better life, and arrived to find Hope's End." In that moment, they stopped hoping for a better tomorrow and instead lived for the day. Okay, so not gonna lie, I was looking for a red wine and I was looking for something with a kind of a spooky title to do in order of to properly celebrate Halloween. And I picked this up and I ended up really liking it. It was very well reviewed on Vivino. Yeah, Vivino, which is like a wine review app. So this is it in the glass. It's a dark ruby red. I'm sure you can't see I'm sure you can't see the color, but it's a dark ruby red. It smells very rich, and when you take a sip, it's very smooth going down. It did say on Vivino, one of the reviews said that it's better on the second day. This has actually been opened more than 2 days, at least 3 days at this point, I think. And I do notice now that I'm drinking it now, it's a lot smoother, it's a lot less acidic. When I first drank it, it was a lot more in your face, but now it goes down a lot smoother. It's lost some of that raw edge. But obviously when I was first tasting it and first pairing it, it was kind of in your face. It had that bite, you know, and that's what I hung on to, because obviously I was doing my best to pair this with spooky pairings, and inspired by the deep red color of this and by that little bite I was sensing when I was drinking it, I decided to do vampires. So who doesn't love a good vampire story? Everyone loves a good vampire story. Vampires have been around for ages in some form or other. Now, this, in terms of the tasting notes, it says lush boysenberry, marmalade and cherry jam, laced with subtle new oak. So that is definitely what I'm tasting. Tastes kind of red berries, a bit jammy. It's not super sweet. It's not super sweet, but it's sweeter than it is dry. Now, when I'm talking vampires, I'm talking those people who are tall, gorgeous, pale, dark hair, kind of pale red lips, and they're there holding this drink in their little castle, floating, you know, gliding along the stairs. That's what I'm imagining. Think Snow White and Neil Gaiman's Snow Glass Apples. That kind of vampire. But so what books are we pairing this with? Obviously, we can't do a vampire booktube episode without mentioning the OG Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I read this relatively quickly. It's a pretty short classic novel, so if you want to read more classics but are intimidated by the chonkers, don't get me started on Russian literature, this is a good alternative. It's only a little over 200 pages, and it's a relatively quick read. It is pretty engaging. I found it very enjoyable. I did find some of the characters a little slow. You know what I'm saying? One of those people who are like, this plot would be a lot shorter if you just listen to each other, if you just explain things to each other, if you just believed each other. But anyway, without certain misunderstandings, we wouldn't have a plot. That being said, however, I always like to recommend it because I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I want to read more classics, but they're so intimidating. This is not at all. This is very easy to read, and it's not that scary, actually. At least I didn't find it that scary. The other books that I'm going to be recommending today require more trigger warnings than this book. This book, I would say trigger warnings for murder, blood, gore, mild gore, death. I think there is an animal death. I'm not sure. But and sexism. But the sexism is contextualized as appropriate for the time that the book was written. So nothing so it you understand. You expect a certain amount of sexism with books that are from that era. So overall, it's a good classic. I had fun reading it, and I was able to take off the classic check on my reading list that year. It's a fun adventure. Dr. Van Helsing is very fun. Do not expect him to look like Hugh Jackman. I know we're all thinking of that movie, or maybe we're not. It was a bit of a B movie, but there's that B movie with Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing and what's her name? Kate someone as Lady Harkness something. It's not like that. He's an old Dutch guy who is more of an academic than anything else, than a monster hunter. So but it's still a fun read, and there are some very poignant moments, and overall I thought it was fun, and I think it would be good to pair with this wine on a Halloween Eve. The next two books do require more trigger warnings. The next one in particular, because I don't remember the exact details of this book. I only remember liking it a lot. And that is The Strain by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. I read this ages ago, maybe close to 10 years ago at this point. To be honest, I don't remember a lot of it. I just remember the premise of there being a plane that lands and everyone in it is dead. I don't know if they're dead or disappeared, but I think this plane lands and everyone inside is dead. And from there, this like vampiric virus starts spreading all around. I think it's set in New York City. Let me check. I'm not sure if it's New York, but it's definitely the US. Yes, it's in New York. It's set in New York primarily. And so this like vampiric virus starts rampaging around New York and spreading to different places as well. And it kind of follows the Bram Stoker theme of having like this old academician who is like an expert on the vampires, and he teams up with someone a little bit more swashbuckling. I don't remember the details, so for content warnings, I am relying on Storygraph. So for Storygraph, they have content warnings: graphic for violence, death, and gore, moderate for animal death, unaliving, and genocide, and minor for domestic abuse, racism, and alcoholism. Again, I can't speak to it myself because all I remember is that I really enjoyed this book. I can't even remember reading. This is the first of a trilogy, and I don't even remember reading the rest. So I do remember liking it a lot though. And now that I've rediscovered it, I'm planning to reread it and read the rest of the trilogy. So maybe you can join me in reading it while drinking Hope's End. The last book is not actually a book, it's a series, and I'm recommending the entire series, but I will talk primarily about the first book. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite series, but I recognize it is it requires all the trigger warnings, just like all of them. And that book is the Black Jewel series by Anne Bishop. And the Black Jewel series by Anne Bishop, that's the series I'm talking about. And it is an amazing series. It is an amazing series. But I will admit that the first book, and even throughout the rest of the book, but the first book in particular is very triggering. And in particular, the again, I wanted to be sure I didn't miss out on anything in terms of the triggers, so I'm relying on Storygraph. So graphic trigger warnings for sexual assault, child abuse, sexual violence, including child sexual assault, and child abuse also includes child neglect and gaslighting, severe gaslighting of children. Moderate content warnings for gore, pedophilia, and rape, and minor content warnings for infidelity and cannibalism. Now, the cannibalism is not because they're like chowing down on bodies, but because within this world there are creatures known as guardians and demons who are essentially living undead. They are people whose bodies are physically dead, but whose soul and like magic are still strong enough to power the body. And so in order for them to keep the body alive, they have to consume blood from the living. But the good guys at least have like a very strict code and a very like complicated ritualistic system in order for them to consume blood safely and consensually. But the bad guys just take and take, because again, they are the bad guys. And that's the thing, the bad guys here are completely irredeemable. There is no nuance here. There is no nuance here, okay? This is not the most nuanced book, which is really surprising considering how, okay, I will say this is not the most nuanced book in terms of characterization. Let's leave it at that. That, which is surprising because of how nuanced the world building is. I'll get to that in a second. But in terms of characterization, the good guys are basically Mary Sue's or Mary or Stewart's. What's the male Mary Sue? They're basically Mary Sue's. They are perfect. They are powerful. They are beautiful. They are incredibly I can't say they're morally upright. I mean, they're murderers too, but within the society that's been created, murder is okay. But like, they are the good, they are the correct people, and they are perfect in basically every way. The main character is this super all-powerful, long prophesized witch who is basically a Mary Sue, but has suffered, but whose only flaws are that she can't cook and can't find her shoes. But again, in the first book is called Daughter of the Blood. Now, in the first book, this main character suffers very severe abuse, including child sexual abuse and severe gaslighting and neglect, and she that feeds into her character, obviously. So I mean, she's more nuanced than a Mary Sue, but that feeds into her characterization for the rest of the series. But the reason why I love this book so much, or the reason I love this series so much, is because of the world building. The world building is amazing. Now, like I've explained already about the whole guardians and demons thing, and then there's like 3 different realms in their world, and in each realm there's different territories, and so the politics of it all, and there's a lot of political intrigue in these books, and it's amazing. Plus, the way that the society is structured in terms of social power, political power, and their magical power is incredibly nuanced, and their society is matriarchal and matrilineal. And so but the way that the men are treated, you'll see the bad guys treat men both terribly and incredibly sexistly. So the bad guys are incredibly sexist against both women and by men. But the good guys, when you look at their society and the way that the two sexes or genders interplay, it is very nuanced, it is very interesting, and it's a great way to show dominance and respect that play into each other. So I do not recommend this if you are under 18. Do not read this when you're under 18. I read this, I first started reading this when I was in like mid high school, and I was severely traumatized. I could not handle it, and obviously there was a failing on the part of the adults around me. But luckily I went back to it when I was more mature and better able to appreciate, or better able to handle the potentially triggering topics, and ended up enjoying the world building and the nuance that there was. But again, this is kind of read at your own risk. It's a well-beloved series. I've seen lots of people say they really love it, but I do believe that it requires lots of trigger warnings and a lot of disclaimers. It requires a lot of disclaimers. But so there you have it. Those are the 3 books that I'm recommending: Bram Stoker's Dracula, The Strain by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. Chuck Hogan? Is that right? Yes, Chuck Hogan. And the Black Jewel series, in particular, Daughter of the Blood by Anne Bishop. So those are the 3 books for our semi-spooky ooky Halloween episode featuring Hope's End. I still have a lot of this to finish, but like I said in my previous video, I'm not drinking too much now because of my mental health. So this will take me a while to finish. But let me know your thoughts down below on these books, and I hope to see you next week when I post my October wrap-up and November TBR. So in the meantime, cheers!